She thought she could control everything. From the color of mailboxes to the height of grass, Karen ruled our neighborhood with an iron fist as the self-appointed queen of the HOA. But her obsession reached a new low when she decided my beloved old oak tree, planted by my late father, was an eyesore that had to go. I refused, of course. It was on my property, protected by law, and meant the world to me. That didn't stop her. One crisp Saturday morning, I woke to the buzz of chainsaws and the sight of a hired crew tearing through my yard. Karen stood proudly on the sidewalk, arms crossed, certain she'd won. But fate, as it turns out, has a wicked sense of humor. Hours later, the very tree she tried to erase came crashing down, not onto my property, but straight through the roof of her pristine, meticulously maintained home. Before the chaos unraveled my world, life in our neighborhood had a certain charm. It wasn't perfect, no place ever is, but it was home. I bought my house 6 years ago, drawn to its big front yard and the towering oak tree that shaded the porch. That tree wasn't just any tree. My father planted it with his own hands when I was a child, and I'd watched it grow alongside me. Its broad branches provided cool shade in the summer, a brilliant tapestry of gold and crimson in the fall. Birds built nests among its leaves, squirrels darted through its limbs, and on quiet evenings I'd sit beneath it with a book, feeling connected to something larger and more enduring than myself. The neighbors were friendly. We exchanged pleasantries over the fence, shared barbecues in the cul-de-sac, and looked out for each other's homes when someone was away. The HOA existed, of course, but it was mostly a formality, until Karen arrived. For the first 5 years, it was an easygoing community where everyone respected personal space. People took pride in their homes, but no one acted like the neighborhood police. I kept my lawn neat, trimmed the shrubs, and made sure my house was well maintained. The oak tree was always the centerpiece of my yard, and more than once, neighbors commented on how beautiful it looked, especially when the afternoon sun filtered through its branches. It was a piece of living history, a memory of my father, a symbol of stability in an ever-changing world. Before the storm that Karen would bring into my life, my days were simple. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, under the oak's dappled light. Evenings ended with the chirping of crickets and the gentle rustle of leaves. I worked from home, ran errands around town, and came back to my peaceful sanctuary. There was no reason to suspect that this harmony would be shattered by a single person's arrogance. But all it takes is one match to start a wildfire, and Karen was about to strike it. Karen moved into the neighborhood about 1.5 years ago, buying the large corner lot 2 houses down from mine. From the moment her moving truck pulled in, there was a different energy about her. She wasn't the friendly, wave-to-everyone type. She was the clipboard-carrying, note-taking, boundary-pushing type. Within weeks of settling in, she attended her first HOA meeting and left with a mission: to become president. It didn't take long. With promises of improving property values and restoring order, she rallied a few like-minded neighbors and secured her seat at the head of the HOA. At first, most of us shrugged it off. If she wanted to update the community newsletter or host more frequent yard sales, fine. But it quickly became clear that Karen viewed her position as a crown, not a responsibility. She began patrolling the neighborhood with a camera, snapping photos of minor violations, mailboxes with chipped paint, garden gnomes that were too whimsical for her taste, trash bins left out a few hours too long. Notices and fines started appearing in mailboxes like clockwork. People grumbled, but few wanted to confront her. Karen's personality thrived on control. She spoke with a sharp tone, her words always coated with the kind of false politeness that made your skin crawl. "I'm just trying to help maintain our community's standards," she'd say with a tight smile, even as she doled out another ridiculous fine. She relished her authority and believed it gave her the right to dictate how everyone should live. I had managed to stay off her radar for a while, mostly because I kept my property in good shape. But I could sense her eyes on my tree every time she walked by. She hated it. That much was clear. Perhaps it blocked her view, or maybe its wild branches offended her carefully curated vision of suburban perfection. Whatever the reason, her disdain for the oak grew each day. I'd often catch her staring at it from the sidewalk, arms folded, lips pursed in disapproval. Despite the growing tension, I tried to maintain civility. After all, life was too short for petty neighborhood wars. But Karen wasn't looking for peace. She was looking for control. and soon she would take her obsession too far. It started one crisp morning in early spring. I was sipping coffee on my porch, enjoying the soft breeze rustling through the oak's leaves, when I noticed Karen marching up my walkway. Her purposeful stride and tight-lipped expression told me this wasn't a social call. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We need to talk about that tree," she said, gesturing sharply toward the oak as if it were some monstrous blight. I set my cup down and met her gaze calmly. She launched into her argument. The tree was dangerous, she claimed. Its roots could be damaging the sidewalk. Its branches hung too far over the street. It shed too many leaves. It was, in her words, an eyesore that brought down the neighborhood's appearance. I listened politely, then explained that the tree was entirely on my property, had been inspected recently, and posed no danger. I even produced the arborist's report confirming its health and stability. Karen's smile was thin and cold. "That may be your opinion, but as HOA president, I have a responsibility to ensure the neighborhood remains safe and attractive." Her words were coated in faux concern, but her eyes burned with determination. I calmly informed her that the HOA had no jurisdiction over privately owned trees unless they posed an immediate hazard, which this one clearly didn't. Her tone shifted. Gone was the polite veneer. "If you won't do something about it, I will," she snapped, turning on her heel and stalking back down the walkway. I watched her retreat, heart pounding but resolute. The oak wasn't just a tree, it was a living memory of my father, a part of my home. I wasn't about to let Karen bully me into chopping it down. Over the following weeks, the pressure mounted. I received letters from the HOA citing vague nuisance clauses. Neighbors mentioned that Karen was spreading rumors about the tree being a safety hazard. Each attempt was met with my firm refusal and another copy of the arborist's report. I knew my rights, and I was prepared to defend them. But Karen wasn't one to take no for an answer. And beneath her composed exterior, she was plotting her next move. A few weeks after our last heated exchange, life returned to a semblance of normalcy, or so I thought. The oak stood tall and proud in my yard, untouched, and Karen seemed to have backed off. I assumed, perhaps foolishly, that she'd finally accepted defeat. When a family gathering came up out of town, I decided it was the perfect time for a brief escape. I packed an overnight bag, double-checked my windows and doors, and hit the road with a sense of relief. It was late afternoon when my phone buzzed with a call from my neighbor, Lisa. Her voice was tense. "Hey, are you home?" she asked. When I told her I was away, her next words sent a chill down my spine. "There's a crew in your yard with chainsaws. Karen's out there directing them." For a moment, I couldn't process what I was hearing. Surely there was some misunderstanding. "Are you sure they're cutting the tree?" I asked. Lisa confirmed it. They were already setting up ladders and ropes, with Karen standing nearby, clipboard in hand, barking orders. Panic surged through me. I thanked Lisa and told her to take photos if she could. My heart pounded as I jumped back into my car and sped toward home, calling my attorney along the way. He advised me to document everything and avoid direct confrontation. I called the local police non-emergency line to report potential trespassing and property damage. The drive felt endless. I replayed every conversation, every warning I'd given Karen about the legal protections around the tree. She couldn't possibly think she had the right to do this. And yet, there she was, seizing the opportunity while I was away. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with each passing mile. As I neared my street, the distant whine of chainsaws reached my ears before I even turned the corner. My stomach dropped. Lisa had sent me several photos already, clear shots of workers in my yard, saws in hand, branches already falling. My beloved oak, the living memory of my father, was under attack. Fury and helplessness mixed into a bitter cocktail as I pulled into my driveway. It was worse than I'd imagined, and the day's nightmare was only beginning. When I pulled into the driveway, I slammed the car into park and jumped out, heart racing. The scene before me was surreal. Half the branches of my oak lay strewn across the yard, a thick blanket of green and broken wood. The crew, 5 men in hard hats and safety vests, were in the middle of sawing through the main trunk. Karen stood a few feet away on the sidewalk, arms crossed, and an infuriatingly smug look on her face. I stormed toward her, my voice sharp. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded. She barely blinked. "Handling a dangerous nuisance since you refused to," she said coolly. I couldn't believe her audacity. I told her in no uncertain terms that she was trespassing and destroying private property without my permission. She waved a piece of paper in front of me, some fabricated emergency work order she'd drafted on HOA letterhead. I snapped a photo of it immediately. My neighbor Lisa, bless her heart, stood nearby, phone in hand, recording the entire exchange. I turned to the crew. "You are cutting down this tree illegally. Stop now," I said, trying to remain composed. One of the workers looked uncertain, glancing at Karen for guidance, but she snapped, "Keep going. You're protected under HOA orders." The foreman shrugged and signaled them to continue. I knew then that no amount of reasoning would stop what was already in motion. I pulled out my phone and called the police again, this time as an active trespassing and vandalism complaint. I documented everything, photos of the damage, the crew at work, Karen's smug presence, and the phony order she had brandished. My attorney called back, advising me to stay calm and gather as much evidence as possible. By the time officers arrived 20 minutes later, the bulk of the tree was down. The officers questioned everyone, but the damage was already done. Karen tried to spin the story, claiming she acted for public safety, but her lack of any legal authority was glaring. The officers told her that this was a civil matter, but one she might deeply regret. Standing amid the ruin of my father's tree, I felt gutted and furious. Yet, beneath that anger, a strange sense of anticipation stirred. The day wasn't over, and karma was watching. By late afternoon, the yard looked like a war zone. The majestic oak that had stood for decades was now a heap of branches and splintered wood. The crew packed up their equipment, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing, not in the sky, but in the air around them. Karen remained smug, chatting with a few curious neighbors who had wandered over, spinning her version of events. I kept my distance, documenting every last inch of damage, my phone, a shield, and a weapon. The police report had been filed, and my attorney assured me we had a strong case. Still, I couldn't shake the sick feeling in my stomach. That tree was irreplaceable. As the sun dipped low, dark clouds began gathering on the horizon. The forecast had mentioned the possibility of evening storms, but I hadn't paid much attention earlier. Now, gusty winds picked up, swirling the remaining debris around the yard. I retreated inside, exhausted and emotionally drained. I barely had time to grab a glass of water when a loud, violent crash shook the house. I rushed to the window, heart in my throat. What I saw nearly made me laugh through my tears. The crew had left the massive trunk of the oak lying precariously along the property line, braced on a few unstable limbs. The rising wind had tipped it off balance. The entire weight of the trunk had shifted and come crashing straight down onto the side of Karen's house. The impact was catastrophic. A gaping hole yawned in her roof, shingles and wooden beams jutting out at wild angles. Broken glass littered her once pristine flower beds. Water from a burst gutter already poured through her eaves. From my porch I could hear her shrieking, her voice cutting through the storm like a siren. Neighbors gathered again, some gasping, others exchanging knowing looks. Phones were out, capturing the scene. Lisa stood beside me, shaking her head. "That's karma," she said softly. I couldn't argue. I watched as Karen ran around in a frenzy, trying to salvage what she could, finally forced to confront the literal weight of her arrogance. The oak had fallen, but it had made its final statement loud and clear. Justice, sometimes, needs no courtroom. Karen's reaction was nothing short of theatrical. The moment the trunk caved in her roof, she bolted out of her house in a frenzy, raincoat flapping wildly in the growing storm. Her hair was a tangled mess, her voice a shrill mix of outrage and disbelief as she shouted into her phone, demanding immediate assistance. I stood on my porch, soaked from the rain but rooted in place, watching the chaos unfold with a strange sense of calm. I had warned her. I had tried to prevent this. Now the consequences of her actions were crashing down around her, quite literally. Within minutes, flashing lights appeared at the corner. The same officers from earlier returned, accompanied by the fire department and an insurance adjuster who had been called by one of Karen's frantic neighbors. Karen rushed to them, waving her arms and pointing accusingly toward my property. Her voice cut through the storm. "He caused this! His tree was dangerous. He refused to take it down. The officers listened patiently, their expressions unreadable. When they turned to me, I was ready. I calmly presented the police report I had filed earlier, the photos and video footage Lisa had captured of the unauthorized crew working under Karen's supervision, and the bogus emergency order she had fabricated. I explained how the tree had been perfectly stable and healthy until Karen's illegal interference compromised it. The adjuster, flipping through the documentation, frowned. The officers, too, seemed unimpressed with Karen's story. Neighbors began chiming in, recounting how Karen had orchestrated the entire event, how she had stood in my yard, directing the crew. One elderly neighbor even provided a written statement on the spot. Karen's face turned crimson, her protests growing more desperate. "You can't let him get away with this," she screamed. But no one was listening anymore. The officers explained that the matter would likely be settled civilly and that her actions had left her legally exposed. The adjuster noted that because the tree was felled by her order and on my private property, her insurance would bear the brunt of the claim, if they covered her at all. Karen's face twisted in disbelief. The queen of the HOA, reduced to a soaked, flailing figure amidst the ruins of her own arrogance. I watched silently, a bittersweet mix of sadness for my tree and satisfaction that karma had delivered swift and undeniable justice. The following days unfolded like a slow-motion unraveling of Karen's carefully constructed world. The damage to her house was extensive. Structural beams compromised, roofing destroyed, several rooms exposed to the elements. Insurance adjusters swarmed the property, and word quickly spread through the neighborhood about what had transpired. Neighbors who once cowered before Karen's clipboard now avoided her altogether, their sympathy firmly on my side. Many stopped by to express their support, sharing their own grievances about her heavy-handed rule. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt united against her. Karen, meanwhile, launched a desperate campaign to shift blame. She fired off angry emails to the HOA board, accusing me of negligence and malicious intent. But the evidence was stacked against her. The video footage, eyewitness accounts, the false emergency order, and the police report all painted a clear picture. My attorney filed a civil suit for property damage, trespass, and emotional distress. His confidence was unwavering. "She doesn't have a leg to stand on," he told me. At the next HOA meeting, the mood was electric. Residents packed the room, many speaking up about their frustrations with Karen's leadership. The board, wary of legal entanglements and public backlash, voted to suspend her from her duties pending the outcome of my lawsuit. The once dominant Karen sat in the back, seething, her authority crumbling before her eyes. As the legal process unfolded, Karen's situation grew more precarious. Her insurance company, citing her unauthorized actions and the fabricated order, denied her claim. She was left to shoulder the repair costs herself, tens of thousands of dollars. The stress showed in her every appearance, her sharp, commanding presence replaced by a weary, haggard figure haunted by the fallout of her own hubris. Through it all, I remained focused. Losing the oak had been a personal blow, a painful reminder that some things once lost cannot be restored. But in the midst of that loss, I found resilience and the strength to stand firm against injustice. The tree may have fallen, but its final act had exposed a truth the entire neighborhood now saw clearly. And justice, though delayed, was well on its way. In the weeks that followed, as the dust settled and the neighborhood returned to a strange new normal, I often found myself standing in the yard where the old oak once stood. The space felt barren without its towering presence, the patch of earth scarred and raw. It hurt more than I expected. That tree had been a living memory, a testament to my father's care and the passage of time. Watching it fall had felt like losing him all over again. Yet beneath the sorrow, another emotion quietly grew: resolve. Karen's downfall had sent a clear message to the entire neighborhood. No one, not even the self-appointed queen of the HOA, was above the law. The outpouring of support I'd received reminded me of the strength of community when good people stand together. Neighbors who once kept their distance now stopped to chat, sharing words of encouragement and gratitude. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. The lawsuit progressed steadily, with Karen's legal team scrambling to mitigate the damage. My attorney assured me that our case was rock solid. The financial restitution would help cover the cost of landscaping repairs and perhaps even fund the planting of a new tree. But no amount of money could replace the years that oak had witnessed, the shade it had provided, or the memories woven into its branches. Through it all, I'd learned a powerful lesson about patience and principle. There were moments during the ordeal when I'd been tempted to lash out, to match Karen's aggression with my own. But staying grounded, relying on facts, and trusting the process had proven far more effective. In the end, it wasn't my anger that brought about justice, it was her own arrogance that undid her. As I looked over the yard one crisp morning, I made a quiet promise. A new sapling would be planted in that very spot, not to replace what was lost, but to honor it and to symbolize the resilience of standing firm against injustice. And as for Karen, her reign of control was over, her legacy reduced to cautionary whispers. The oak had fallen, but its spirit remained, rooted in memory, in justice, and in the quiet strength of knowing that right had prevailed. Months passed, and the wounds left by the fallen oak slowly began to heal. The bare patch of earth where it once stood remained a daily reminder of all that had transpired. But in time, it also became a symbol of resilience. With the lawsuit nearing a favorable conclusion, I used part of the expected settlement to commission a local nursery to plant a young red maple in its place. Watching its slender trunk sway gently in the breeze brought a bittersweet sense of peace. Life moves forward, always. Karen's house, meanwhile, remained a work in progress. Repairs dragged on as disputes with her insurance company deepened. The bright, pristine facade she had so proudly maintained now stood marred by scaffolding and tarps, a visual testament to the consequences of unchecked arrogance. The neighborhood, once tense under her watchful eye, had found a new spirit of camaraderie. Residents who had once kept their distance now shared knowing smiles and friendly conversations. The HOA, now under more balanced leadership, shifted its focus back to fostering community rather than control. Eventually, the inevitable happened. A moving truck arrived one cool autumn morning. Without fanfare or farewell, Karen packed her things and left. No one gathered to see her off. As her car disappeared down the street, the neighborhood seemed to exhale in unison. Peace had returned, and as I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, I looked toward the young maple and smiled. Sometimes karma simply needs time and a strong gust of wind to set things right. If you've ever dealt with an entitled HOA president or a neighbor who thought the rules didn't apply to them, you know just how exhausting and frustrating it can be. This experience taught me that patience, perseverance, and standing up for your rights truly matter. Justice may take time, but it will find its way. I'd love to hear your stories. Have you faced a situation like this? Share it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale of karma, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more real-life stories just like this one.